One of the things that can destroy self-confidence is the fear of losing one's friends or a loved one. So how do you deal with the fear of losing someone? Jennifer woke up in a sweat with the memories of last night's dream still fresh and surreal. She was having that dang nightmare again, and those nightmares would not have been mere nightmares because they were haunting her even during her waking hours. This was one like all the other dreams where she was running after a familiar person who would later on fall into a deep cavern. And in all her dreams, she was the one hero who was doing everything to save the same person from falling again and again. The funny thing is, she could not see their face. Psychologists would interpret Jennifer's dream as something which speaks of her inner feelings in life. One fear which can come out in the open was her fear of losing people near to her, people whom she loved dearly. The fear of losing someone you love is normal for most people. This stems from your fear of being alone. In this world and in any world, your fear of not being able to bear the thought of being the one who is left behind. Thinking about the possibilities of losing someone you love is devastating, not to mention hurtful. You may have invested too much of your time and feelings in that person, so just the thought of losing that person would leave you in a state of panic. Now there are different categories of people for whom a person can have a deep affection. The fear of losing any of these people can be traumatic for a person, especially if he or she is just experiencing a heavy loss like a divorce or the death of a loved one. A person can fear losing their spouse, their parents, their children, their relatives, their friends, or any person who is close to their heart. This fear can be caused or influenced by several factors such as 1. Divorce and separation. A person who has recently went through a divorce or separation proceeding can easily be haunted by the separation anxiety due to the stress accommodated by the divorced person. It is not easy for a person to live with a spouse for a period of time and then to separate from that person. Divorce proceedings are usually hostile and confrontational, and such proceedings will always leave a bad taste in your mouth. In the same manner, a person who is about to undergo a divorce or separation will also be subject to a lot of stress. Another fear, the empty nest. A full-time mother can easily feel depressed when she realizes her children are growing up and are slowly becoming independent. This anxiety stems from the thought that for those several years when she was needed by her children, and now they can somehow manage on their own, then she will no longer be needed and useful. A mother who has experienced this fear of losing her children should try to immerse herself back into society by finding a business or a useful hobby that will keep her occupied. The feeling of uselessness is a natural, but you have to find a way to combat this fear by making yourself useful in other ways. So why not look at other situations in another way? Why not accept the fact that you have reared your children so well that they have prepared themselves to live their own lives, and now it is time for them to walk alone without their mother or father's help. Another fear, the death in the family. A death in the family of your own circle of friends will always make a person realize how feelings can be. The realization can manifest themselves into the fear of losing someone you love due to illness or sudden death. Death is inevitable, and it will do you good to make time for people you love. If you are already spending enough time with them, then you can always improve the quality of the time you spend with your loved ones. The fear of losing a loved one is always in existence. One can never get away from this fear because there are situations that will make a person think of the possibilities of being separated from other people they love. But the possibility of losing someone is one of life's facts, and no one can prevent this from happening. However, one can always soften the blow of being left behind by preparing for such an eventuality. Chapter 5. The fear of failure. Failure is success in disguise. Jurius was a surgeon And only 3 years ago, he learned that one must fail in order to learn how to get better. However, such a philosophical was not known to him when he was still young. He began to realize it as such when he was confronted with failure in his personal life and in his career. His realization came hazily as the memories of such a tender age were faded by time. What he can remember, though, is that he was always striving hard to learn how to ride a bike. His mom and dad bought him a bike too big for his age, and so he had difficulty learning to use his pedals. But Jurius persisted his biking skills, and every day, sometimes he failed, but he could never achieve. But his bicycle had a handbrake, and he would remember using his feet to stop the brake in the bike. He would feel better and get more comfortable. Finally, frustration was born in fruit because after weeks of practice, he had learned to ride the bike in his neighborhood. Such a simple lesson from a child, but every adult can learn just as much from it. Our society has placed so much emphasis on success that failure has become a dirty and much avoided word. Others rely on positive thinking to keep failure at bay. While it helps, it also lulls a person into believing that nothing can go wrong, thus creating a false sense of security. Failure may be a bitter pill to swallow, but everyone must fail at one time in their lives. However, as Jurius' experience has taught him, it is not the fact that you have failed that is important, but the manner in which you accepted it and rose up from such a failure. A person can either allow himself to be thwarted by failure, or he can use such failure to build up his own determination to climb higher mountains. What is important is that the experience of failure was not for nothing, because that person who failed learned something from that experience. Those who fear failure should know that most successful people have failed one or many times in their lives. But what made the difference is how they learned from their failure and how they used that failure to succeed in life. The real failures are those who fail once and then refuse to try anything ever again for fear they might fail again. The fear of failure creates anxiety due to the fear of not knowing and not being certain of what will happen next. Most often, this results in a small problem being blown out of proportion. The more a person thinks about the possibility of failing, the more they will jump to conclusions on the possible scenarios. Unknowingly, this fear of failure has made a small problem into a bigger and more complicated one. A person who fears failure can sometimes become too competitive. It forces them to treat every other person and every opportunity as a threat. This takes the joy out of doing something that should have been simple and without pressure. Such a person becomes nervous and anxious, and the feeling of being pressured to do more and more exceeds what is normally and forces the person to be erratic and weary. Fear of failure is normal. How you deal with this can make the difference in your life. The best thing to do when confronted with the fear of failure is to take inspiration from the reliable bamboo tree, which bends when confronted with a strong wind to keep itself from breaking, and to rise again when the wind has stopped. First, a person must accept the fact that they are not a perfect human being. In fact, no one was perfect but Jesus. A person has the right to err and to fail. And so you have to give yourself another chance and another day to fight your battles again. Always have a support group to lean on when the going gets rough, so that you will not fear failure alone and be rejected. Most successful people rely on their families, their friends, when they're at their lowest point in their life. Others rely upon their dreams making it to the top. Whatever you do, do not keep the fear of bitterness inside you, because you just build it up and it ruins you. Talk about your fear and your frustrations, because it is the only way to get them out of your system. Whoever said that failure is success turned inside out must have experienced failure at one time or another in their life. Or how else would they know? How Or else could we come to know that failure is just success in disguise? Chapter 6. Fear of people rising above one's fear of. Hannah possesses a voice that can even cause the angels to sleep. She has a quality of voice that soothes the senses and makes one feel relaxed and at ease. However, Hannah's fear of an audience has caused her to not let anyone hear her sing, and she does not have the guts to do it in public. She tried it once, but she was in high school and it caused shame and pain. So she never forgot about that incident as she stood on the stage holding the mic without any voice coming from her. She was really all right, but the sight of those people looking at her made her voice disappear. Ever since that humiliating experience, Hannah has never tried or had the chance to sing in front of people again. Not that she lacked opportunities, it's that she could not do it. She couldn't make herself get in front of an audience. Her fear of performing in public had incapacitated her in her life, or so she thought. Fear is a strong emotion which is often caused by the knowledge of a lurking danger. It is actually a person's reaction to an actual or perceived danger to oneself. Sometimes a person's fear serves them as a defense mechanism. It is believed that fear is usually hereditary, such as the case in a child who may have an inherited fear of certain biological traits from his parents. Such traits may have an effect on how a person's brain chemicals regulate the person's moods and how he reacts to stimulations that may cause fear. A person's present fears will also depend on her parents' behavior, particularly on how cautious they were and how they reacted to danger. Fear can be classified into many degrees, but the most popular and commons are phobias, panic, and terror. A phobia is an irrational and exaggerated fear of a particular situation or an object. Panic is usually characterized by an hysterical reaction to a certain stimulus. Terror, on the other hand, is the greatest degree of fear, usually causing a person to become immobilized. A person's fear of other people is called anthropomorphic. Anthrophobia, which is the fear of people in general, or the fear of society, and that's called schizophrenia. A person who has regularly experienced anxiety or discomfort in the presence of other people may become schizophrenic. People who have this phobia are still able to lead a normal life, but they tend to avoid social events. It is also commonly manifested in what we call stage fright, and the fear of performing in front of an audience. A person who becomes frightened will get sweaty palms, will feel butterflies in their stomach, and experience a drying of the throat and the mouth, and start to have panic attacks. Such fear can have serious effects on a person's family life and a career. A person who is frightened and fearful, who has no control over his fears, loses his freedom to act. Fear of people may be a manifestation of a person's shyness or lack of confidence in meeting other people. A shy person avoids meeting people because he feels he is inferior to them. A person who has no confidence in himself may fear meeting people who he perceives as greater or more able than them. Such a semblance of normalcy or fearing of other people is normal somewhat. It is normal to fear people who have more power in their hands or people who may have more moral ascendancy over you. It is also normal to fear performing in front of an audience, especially if you are not used to being the center of attention. While most of these fears are normal, a person should not let these fears take over their personality. A person should acknowledge that they have these fears and should try to do things to overcome these fears, or else he will forever be incapacitated by his fears. If you fear meeting people in general, then try going out in public more often. Try going to malls. They offer people from all walks of life. Try to talk to other people or to sales ladies or other customers who seem to be friendly to you. Talk about anything. Comment on the weather, the recent news, or a community affair. You can also start relating to people in your community because you will be more comfortable talking to them. Try to talk to one new person each day until you have developed the habit of greeting people you encounter in the streets. A simple good morning is enough for you to combat your shyness. Take little steps and gradually experience speaking with groups of people. Do not let your shyness overpower you. You may have fears, but other people are not exactly fearless. What is important is your acknowledgement of your fears, and to do something to overcome them.